Welcome to Automating Hashtopolis. Turn this, I can actually see this as I do my awkward thing. So, disclaimer, I have to read this because legal will kill me if I don't. This talk has not been vetted by IBM, IBM Security, or X-Force Red. Opinions expressed in this talk are mine and mine alone. I'm not here speaking on behalf of Hashcat, Hashtopolis, Team Hashcat, the Church Wi-Fi, CSP, Illuminati, or Bigfoot. No warranties expressed or implied, not responsible for setting your house on fire, break your Hashtopolis instance, blow up your database, otherwise severely break something or get yourself fired. Please seek the assistance of a professional before doing this in production. So, who am I? I'm known as Evil Mod in the industry. I'm a bishop of the Church of Wi-Fi, hacker for X-Force Red, member of Team Hashcat, and at the CCDC I was also Rear Admiral Evil, Mohammed bin Evil, and Special Agent Evil. Why are you here? Because Hashtopolis is awesome. Hashtopolis manages Hashcat, and Hashtopolis can be automated with JSON. That's right, you all can be very, very lazy. So, some terminology before we get going, just in case you haven't used Hashtopolis. An agent is a Hashcat worker node. Trust is an agent that is trusted to run secret hash lists. A secret is a hash list that cannot be sent to untrusted agents. A task is a Hashcat job. A hash list is a list of hashes. Hashcat's an awesome password cracker. Thank you, Adam. And Hashtopolis manages Hashcat to distribute work. Thanks S3, Hops, WinXP et al., or others that smartly grew up in front of me. So, we need to get started. With this, you need to obviously install Hashtopolis. It needs to sort of work at some point. If it doesn't, start here. Next, go generate yourself an API key. Go to Users, API Management, generate a key. Then there's a nice little document that I'll be referencing throughout most of this. There's a user API.pdf which has the entire JSON spec for automating things. The tool I'm going to be talking about is the Python bindings that calls it, but realistically you can run this in Python, PowerShell, JavaScript, Ruby, C#, C++ if you're sadistic, but right now we're going to talk about the Python bindings. So you make a new directory for your project. In that directory, clone my really terrible repo. It's Python version 2 only. No, I haven't upgraded to Python 3 because I'm lazy. I assume you're all good. Do you want to restart? All right, cool. So, so you make your directory. You clone my bindings as a submodule. Questionable stuff happens, and we potentially profit. So the first thing you need to do is make yourself a config.json. There's 3 critical things you need to know here. One is your endpoint that you're talking to. This will be your Hashtopolis instance. You know, if you're being smart, you're running this from port 443, but most of us are lazy, we're on port 80, really insecure about it. But set yourself your endpoint. Cert path is if you want to actually validate the certificate, otherwise set this just a false. Also, there's a typo here. It should be a lowercase f, not an uppercase f on the JSON. I discovered that this morning when I was fixing my slides. You set the API key, relatively easy. So that's the major things you need to configure. Next thing you want to do is you want to test your connection to Hashtopolis. So in this case, run from HTTP client API.functions import star, x equals test connection, print x, it'll return success. There are only 2 portions of the Python bindings that return success or okay. Everything else returns raw JSON. And that is because I didn't feel like writing JSON parsers for the rest of the API because I was lazy. So, test connection and test access return some kind of parse, everything else doesn't. Under the hood, it's just all straight JSON. In fact, the entire API is, and that's where that PDF comes in handy. So in this case, we're sending a section test, section request, or connection, request connection. It'll return test connection success. This is the only entry that does not require an API key, so if your API key is wrong, this will still succeed. And this is just for us to get ready. Now we need to make sure our API key actually works, so we'll do something like test connection, test access, standard import, print your outputs. Pretty simple. Like it's all Python 2. I will port it eventually, but ignore my terrible print statements. Checking the access under the hood looks like a simple, section test request access, give it an access key. It'll return okay or error. Relatively simple. And occasionally the error messages are actually useful, like API key not found. Now let's do something useful. So let's say we want to create a hash list, like say the example 0.hash. We import our Python bindings, import base64. We'll then read the example 0.hash, You base 64 encode it, and you pass off to create hash lists. So in this case, the order is going to be name, whether it's salted or not, whether it's going to be a hex salt, whether it's secret, your separator, your hash format, your hash type ID, access group ID, then your encoded data, whether you're using brain and the brain features, and it should return something like this. It'll give you a response of okay. If you ever have any questions as to what, if you're implementing your own, the PDF is fantastic. I'm pretty sure they just have some latex that generates the PDF on a routine basis, so you could go grab the latex, but I actually did all this by hand. But yeah, you've seen here in the API, like it's salted, it's secret, it's hex salt. You can pretty much do anything you need to make a custom hash list relatively quickly. The important part is the hash format, as well as, one sec. Yeah, it's hash format's the important one. There's also a section in here where you can set up whether it's a binary, etc. But, relatively simple. The next thing you can do that's really cool, say you have 100 masks and you want to go add them to a hash list, like say Pathwell from the CoreLogic folks. In this case, we're going to import our HTTP client API functions. We're going to set the hash list ID, which is a numeric number. In this case, my hash list was 1. We give it a priority value of 102. We set the speed or the benchmark type to speed because the default benchmark one tends to fail most of the time. If this breaks out, you can flip back to regular benchmark mode, open your Pathwell file, do a quick loop through it. We'll set a priority minus the priority of when we do things. Take mask to strip off the new line character. This is very important. If you have a new line character at the end of it, it might throw a few things off. Then we create our tasks. So in this case, we set the task name, set the hash list ID, you can set the attack mode, and then your mask. We set, in this case, 1200 is your chunk timer. I can't remember what 5 wasn't 5. I'll see this in the next line when we go through it. Set your benchmark, you set your color on things, whether it's a secret hash, etc., etc., then it prints the new task out when you're done, and it looks like, okay, I just have to go to the JSON for this. You also set your priority for your strings. The important, if you see those little brackets there, that's your file number. So whenever you're creating a list in Hashtopolis, say you want to create a word list, say example0.dict, you want to import that file, you know what the file number is, you insert those into brackets, and it just prints out your new task. Quick and handy little script for if you need to go run, say, pack on various things and import bulk tasks. Now this is kind of superfluous because they now have this in the GUI that makes the import really easy, but I like things from the CLI. This one's handy. Have you ever had to go delete all of your tasks from Hashtopolis manually by clicking each and every single individual one? This has happened in contests. It really annoyed me. So, in this case, we do a nice quick import the API, do a quick list tasks, and there's a task ID set in the list tasks JSON, so we just loop through the tasks, and set kill task to delete task, that line in your task ID, and it'll tell you what it's killing. It'll destroy your 100 Pathwell masks in a matter of seconds. It's pretty quick and easy, which I'm pretty sure saves some of us some time. Other cool thing, if you have a Hashtopolis instance that's been running for a long time, you probably got a lot of cracked hashes stored there. So you can just look them up rather than recracking them all the time. It's like using Hashtopolis as your giant global pod file. So in this case, you run a import of the API again, run the get hash of the hash you're looking for, print X. It'll return hash, it'll return the crack position, the plane, and your salts if they're set. But a cooler way of doing this, if you want to get this done in a, let's get hash details for a second. I have another slide after this. So if you want to get the hash list details, find out what's set on the hash, you just run get hash list on the setting, it'll tell it, or on that particular task ID, it'll tell you what format it is, hash count, your hash list, it'll tell you your hash type ID, your separators, and all this can be used for other functions later on. So that's why I return raw JSON as opposed to returning parsed input for all of this, so you can go look it up and do your own programming. I don't have many assumptions about what you're doing when you're automating your systems.
Which is the way you should be doing it.
That's exactly the way you should be doing it. This one's handy where you want to get all the cracked hashes for a hash list. This is a really dirty way of doing it. Let me show you the next slide how to do it in a way that outputs like a hashcat pot file. But just run get hash list cracked, the hash list ID, and then cracked itself, and then they'll print all your hash set. But a cooler way of doing this, you can spit out things that look like a hashcat hot file. Again, all is completely automated if you're doing later post processing. So we're going to import our API, tell it we want to get the hashes from the get the hash list cracked. Then you do a quick for loop on this, for hash and hashes. You print your hash and your hash plane, add a separator in there, and all of a sudden you've got your dump out of all the plaintext, which is handy if you do this to another system. And you're going to collect your pot files after it. I like this because Hashtopolis tends to be crankier than Hashtopolis ever did, or Hashtopolis specifically, about getting exports from things. So the API is far easier for getting exports from your hash lists. Use this in contests, you'll thank me later. If you want to get task details, we do the same thing. Run a get task on the task ID, print your data out, it'll tell you everything you want to know about a task. And a task in this case is a hashcat job, so this comes in handy when, say, you've dispensed the task and that task tends to have broken. You want to find out what you want to go fix about things. Alternatively, you just forget what you're running about the task, but it gives you the entire command output, whether work is possible. This is handy if you need to find out if a task is complete before moving on to another one. S3 put this in my request because certain things weren't calculated correctly. So if you want to go look up if a task is complete, just search work possible, true or false. If it's false, then you're good to go. So the important thing you're running into when you're automating Hashtopolis is you're going to need to go look up files for both rules and word lists. And trying to find the file IDs half the time is kind of a pain, so you can just run... did I miss the API call on that? Alright, so I missed the API call on that. The API call is get file files. I'll go do a show on this at the next slide. My apologies, I was writing this a little quick. But yeah, you can run the list files on that. And I'm just going to do a quick little pause here. Bear with me. If I can type that out. So, let's do some actual code. Coding with Mog. My apologies. Is that readable by everybody yet? There we go. That should work. So, CD automation, get files. I can't read today. Oh, list files. That's what it was. List files.py. Yeah, there we go. So, yeah, so files equals list files. Nice and easy. It'll tell you what files are out there. So if we run this, like for example, assuming my internet works today. Nope, doesn't like me. Okay, back to our regular scheduled programming. So, list files is a handy little piece, and at the end of this, I'll also show you how to get a listing of all the definitions that are in there. I have tested each and every single one of them. They should work. If they don't, submit a GitHub request and yell at me. I accept yelling. I'm back to my slideshow now. Nice. Play from current slide. Use slideshow. So I don't PowerPoint well. So yeah, so the get user list is a handy one. From this one, we can do like a listing of all the existing users in your environment, and I'll even show you how to create a user, which is handy for identity management purposes. Quite often during a contest or during the real world, you have to go onboard 30, 40 people, and hitting the click button every single time gets tedious. So, like for example, when I run the script, it returns on user ID 1, equal log, right group 1, which is usually administrator, shows I'm valid, shows my session lifetime. Relatively simple. Now, if you want to create a user, this is handy. So we set our username equals test, email test equals test.com, right group ID equals 1. I'm using a real bullcrap password. Please don't use this in the real world. But yeah, you call create user first. You specify username, email, right group ID, and then you need to go list the users to get that user ID for the user you just created so you set his password. So what we're doing here is we're going for line equals user list from a user list call. If my username matches up, we set his password, and we're good to go. So that's kind of handy in that case if we want to onboard bulk people. This is handy too, creating vouchers. How many of you had to go create like 30, 40 vouchers to go hand out to various agents? I mean, I think CSP maybe not many much else, but this was our create voucher script when I got created. So there's a couple of different voucher creation commands. The one I have is a create voucher random. There's also one where you set a specific voucher code if you don't want to use the built-in random generator. If you want to handle, say, static vouchers for everyone's agents when they get first onboarded. But in this case, we just import the API, run a create agent voucher random, and we list the vouchers and use those for onboarding your agents. So that gets really handy. You can also delete agents, you can delete vouchers, and a few other cool little features on that. This is cool. I mean, I apologize for telling you how to do this, but you know that little donation link at the bottom of the screen? Please donate, then turn off the link. But donate first. So in this case, you import the API. We set force equals false, although force equals true would also work. And we set the donate equals get config donate off, just so we can see what the donation setting was. We print the old setting out. Then you run a set config donate off true with your force value of false. Then you re-get it again, and all of a sudden, like, the donation link's off. Nice and easy. Now, if you want to see what else you can change with that, there's some scripts for that too. Like listing the configuration sections. You run sections equals list sections, loop over it, print each line. You have stuff like cracking your tasks, your YubiKey, your fine-tuning, your UI, server, multicast, notifications. These are some handy broad categories that you see. I don't actually use these when you're changing configs because we use list configuration items for that. So this is handy if you spin up Hashtopolis instances fresh for every contest. You want them configured specific ways. You can configure your entire Hashtopolis instance by setting your donation settings, your server task settings, your chunking settings to be the same every time you guys do something. And if you want to see what the settings are, you just run config items list config, put a for-line over config items, print the lines. And in this case, I just grabbed for brain, for example, to configure brain, but it gives you a big list of configuration items. Figure out what your defaults that you like are once you've set up your Hashtopolis, pull the settings down for each one of them, and make a script for it. This will save you, 20, 30 minutes when you set up a new Hashtopolis, maybe longer. Now this script right here will save your bacon. How many people here, by a show of hands, have put in a bad task and all of a sudden had all their agents shut down into red, and they have, say, 30, 40 tasks they have to go manually fix, and it's a pain clicking every one unless you log into the MySQL server? Yeah, WinXP, S3, hops, you guys know what I'm talking about. This saves my bacon. So what we're doing here is we're going to import the API, list all the agents. And for each agent, we're going to unassign their existing task. We're going to force them to not CPU only, because that happens once in a while. People are clicking the wrong things in your system. Then you reset it to trusted, because we trust all our agents. I mean, we like the system, but also in many cases, we've forgotten to set optimize and workload profile 3 in all of our agents when you're doing NTLM. So in this case, we'll set the agent extra parameters, then you set it to agent active, and all of a sudden your agents are working again, assuming you've deleted your bad task. Keep this around, it saves you logging into your SQL server. And you can do it from the plane, for example, while you're trying to crack a hash, rather than pop in through VPN and figure out how you did your bindings, and et cetera, et cetera. So, I know that was really super quick, so we're going to go through all the other cool API items. This is all the slide material that I had. But the most important thing is check out the Hashtopolis API. The user API guide, which we'll go through and show you some of these options after this little slide here. It has all the debugging information you will ever need. So if my JSON's wrong, the PDF is usually correct, and this changes often, and I don't update my stuff quite often. So, and then my GitHub, like I said, it's Python version 2. I have no problem if you port it to Python version 3, just please don't run an auto Python fire like someone does to my other code, because I will reject your pull request. Donate to the Hashtopolis project, because these guys do it for beer, or buy them beer while they're here. And the 3 bad geniuses are sitting right there. So yeah, special thanks to S3, he has saved my bacon on a number of times when the API was slightly wrong or I wasn't doing things right. He'd fix things in the middle of the night for him, and all of a sudden stuff magically works. And also thanks Adam for making Hashcat. Now, that being said, now this whole thing went through ridiculously fast. Is there anything anybody wants me to cover in detail on the API or functions you'd like to see scripts for? Because all this will wind up on GitHub shortly, but I take requests. All right, so let me show you what the documentation for this looks like over here, just because I love this thing. So they wrote a really detailed API spec guide. Like, it details how the sections look like, what each of the functions look like. For example, let's go run a super task. Here's your section, request ID. You can literally implement this in any language you want. My Python is terrible. I'd love to see this stuff in PowerShell. I'd love to see this in Ruby. I'd like to see people automating Hashtopolis more because it's a great system and it's free. Well, be aware. I paid my license fee in bourbon earlier this week. And the nice part is it's all organized into tasks. Everything is basically, you have a section and a request. So everything regarding tasks is all in the same place. Everything to do with requests, or a secondary section in there. So you can really find your way through how these pieces work. And then if you need to find out in the API how things are sorted, let me get back to this. I just do a quick grep, def, HTTP functions, and that tells me all the various options that are in there. It's not documented well, but it's mostly self-documenting by the parameter names. So if you want to go dig deep into how the automation works, I wrote this over the course of a weekend, manually typing all the JSON in to create the JSON entries, but that's all this thing really is. So more functions.api. This is all this is. I'm literally transcribing the JSON. It's basically a JSON parser or a JSON creator, effectively. So it's more of a toolkit rather than an actual tool in of itself, but you can do some really crazy things with its various functions, and you should never have to touch the GUI again, except for a couple of very specific things. And if you see something that's missing in the API, please submit a pull request, but make sure it's a complete pull request, and you've got exact details, because there's a lot of weird stuff that winds up in the Hashtopolis Git, and they've taken to using the forums for support instead. So check the forums first, check their Discord, and then if that fails, submit a pull request. Or a pull request ideally, but a GitHub issue if not. And I think that's it. Is there any questions? I know it's a dry topic, but thank you all for showing up 3 o'clock on day 2 of a conference we were all drinking the night before. That's it. Thanks, guys.